their childhood. As one study published in the Lancet Public Health recently showed, more than 90% of people experiencing homelessness had one or more adverse childhood experiences. I'm influenced by some of that which I read on the relationship between childhood trauma and substance use in adult life. And yet we know recovery is possible with the right supports and the right treatment. We know that recovery looks different for each person, from reductions in use or less harmful use through to abstinence and sustained sobriety. We know that the strength of recovery is enhanced when people have a safe and stable place to call home. We know that substance use often gets worse while experiencing homelessness. We know that people using substances are further traumatized by the stigma, the denials of services, and the experience of walking the tightrope of life and death on a daily basis. I think it's normal to quit sometimes, or at least want to, when you witness the torments of trauma daily. I think it's normal when you spend your shift wondering how many people you're going to have to revive that day, to wonder if you have the energy to show up the next day. This is not to say that serving people living with trauma, addiction, or mental illness is easy by any stretch. Undoubtedly, the depth of needs of people experiencing homelessness is the most extreme I've experienced in a 30-year career. The good things that are happening in this community, things like the harm reduction shelter, harm reduction outreach, the mobile multidisciplinary outreach team, all great, but there remains the struggle to get people the supports they need and want for their mental health and addictions. Street medicine services in the community are working their tails off, but they remain people with severe primary health care needs on our streets. And outside of things like health, we see things like families struggling to navigate family support services and avoid unnecessary interference from child welfare organizations during their homelessness. And all of this at a time when more people are entering the system than are exiting it. As Jeff mentioned this morning, for every 10 people you help exit homelessness in the San Diego continuum of care, 16 are coming into homelessness. It is a struggle to provide excellent service when the demands seem to never end. And the question that we are left with in this space is, where do we go now? While things like trauma and mental illness and addiction make the response to homelessness more difficult, we cannot get sucked into the false narrative that they are the root causes. Homelessness is the absence of housing. The root cause is not mental illness. The root cause is not addiction. For many, those are made worse by homelessness, but not necessarily the cause of their homelessness. Consider this. About 11% of people in San Diego County experience poverty. Almost none of them are homeless. An untold percentage experience racism. 5% experience serious mental illness. Almost 12% live with a substance use disorder. An unknown percentage experience class or other forms of oppression. And far too many live with trauma. And the good news is that almost every single one of those people are housed. So while day-to-day can feel like the question mark of what to do, I remind you that the answer to the question is, and always will be, housing. You want people's mental health to improve? House them. You want people's substance use recovery to improve? House them. You want people's trauma to get to a place of healing? House them. But that means a multitude of forms of housing. Yeah, supportive housing and rapid rehousing and shared housing and master leasing and acquisition and rehab and bridge housing and interim housing and more. And we need to embrace advancements in technology in creating housing quickly. I'll point out one other thing that just demonstrates the root cause, or debunks some of the root cause. I want you to consider a place like West Virginia, a place where I get to also spend a good amount of quality time on an annual basis. The signs of poverty are everywhere in West Virginia. The impacts of opioids are everywhere in West Virginia. It is the overdose leader by capita in the country and has amongst the lowest rates of homelessness. Why? Because housing is still relatively affordable in West Virginia. West Virginia was not developed more substance use recovery centers and detox centers and treatment centers. They still very much take a law and order approach. But it shows the power of having housing where people can live. I do find it necessary to be hopeful. Hopeful that as a community, as you continue to meet people where they're at, you definitely are not leaving them where they were. I remain hopeful as I spend time with outreach programs and going to different shelters and meeting housing providers in this community, that you have truly embraced the importance of being agents of change, of being peddlers of hope. That you know how to sell the product of a belief in tomorrow and next week and next month. And you do it against these remarkable odds. You do it accepting people for who they are rather than expecting people to change who they are. It's the story I like to tell of the heart attack. Now, I don't wish any of you to have a heart attack at all, but imagine if you did and you were raced to the hospital. Would they make you step on a scale first to see if you were overweight? Would they say to you, listen, we would like to help you with your heart attack, you just got to lose 20 pounds first? If you were a smoker and you had a heart attack, would they say, listen, the Surgeon General has been very clear about this. Smoking is bad for your heart. Be smoke-free for 30 days, and if you're still alive, we'll help you with your heart attack. If you were to drop the F-bomb, because of the pain in your chest, obviously, they'd still help you with your heart attack. If you previously committed murder and you're having a heart attack, you know what they're still going to do when you show up with a heart attack? They're going to help you with the heart attack. And if you're having your fourth heart attack, they don't say, listen, buddy, you've had 3 chances. Clearly you're not serious about your heart health. We're going to serve all these other people who haven't had a chance yet. And if you're still alive, we'll help you. To summarize, you can be an overweight smoking jerk who once killed a person, having your 4th heart attack, and you'd still be a priority for service. We don't say, change who you are so I can give you what you need. We accept that you are who you are, and I will give you what you need. And what this community does really well, thank you. And what this community does remarkably well is truly see the humanity of the people that are served. The patience that I've seen, the discipline and commitment to performance that I've seen, the active listening that I have witnessed is all huge in this community, which is tough. Because I used to think that there were no limits on compassion, but as a society, compassion has crashed. It's been replaced with anger between organizations and worse, anger pointed at people experiencing homelessness. Calls of concern about people sleeping outdoors or tents in parks have been replaced en masse with calls to complain. Get those people off my sidewalk. Get those people out of my parks. Get those people out of my oceanside community. Get those people off my beaches. Get those people out of the downtown. Maybe the constant barrage and demands from others that somehow we are not doing our jobs by people experiencing homelessness in public spaces makes you want to quit sometimes. Or maybe what makes you want to quit sometimes is the politician that praises the nonprofit while deferring to the opinion of law enforcement, only to come around and insult the people we support. Like this.
You know, Brother Benno does a great job, but they haven't done a great job to their neighbors. And I think that I want to see, you know, I mean, we are in a capitalist society, and I think all the neighbors that own buildings there are in favor of Brother Benno's and what they do. But at the same time, Brother Benno's needs to reciprocate by doing a better job, and that hasn't been done. And I think when Officer Valdivinas was here a couple of months ago, he said, well, in the 20 years that I think he's been part of the police department, it's the same thing over and over again. And what's the definition of insanity? You know, doing the same thing but expecting a different result. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction. But I think personally you need 24 hours, because I think it's at 7 o'clock that everybody comes back. The cockroaches come out at night. And so, you know, I don't think this is going to handle it, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
The cockroaches come out at night. There is no doubt that homelessness, poverty, housing justice, addiction, and mental illness have become partisan issues. People experiencing homelessness have become partisan piñatas where people are pawns and misery is pigeonholed to fit an agenda. And rather than bashing barriers, we are bashing people and ideas. We are caught in a tug of war on the polar opposite perspectives of what to do in order to respond to homelessness. And both sides can be unrelenting in their attacks on each other. On the one hand, there's a belief that Housing First does not, cannot, will not work. From their perspective, anybody that believes in Housing First is a sucker and denying data. There are pretty graphics that pretend to illustrate that because homelessness has gone up since the decline of transitional housing and the Housing First approach was embraced, then Housing First must not work. There are forces afoot that think the only answer is involuntary treatment, work camps on the edge of town, and incarceration. These aren't fantasies, these are real ideas. There are forces afoot that believe if someone denies shelter or cannot get into shelter, that they have made a choice to face penalties up to and including incarceration. There are forces afoot who believe that the best response to the trauma of fellow human beings is to inflict more trauma. But on the other hand, there's a blind belief that Housing First, without acknowledging the frustrations of housed people that are pissed off by the rise in homelessness, is going to get us to a place where everything is okay. There's a blind belief in Housing First without accountability to ensure that it's actually practiced with fidelity. When an organization tells me that they do Housing First but cannot tell me which of the evidence-based practices they use to support people, it's a red flag. When people tell me that they do Housing First but cannot tell me the core principles of Housing First, it's a red flag. I think there's no shortage of organizations who like to say that they are all about the Housing First, but have no clue what that really means in practice. And even when Housing First is practiced with fidelity, it doesn't work for about 20% of the people. Longitudinal studies have demonstrated that time and again. But you bring up the fact that 1 in 5 people are not well served with Housing First, and in some situations, well, maybe what you said is considered blasphemous. I also think that we need to be cautious that as we look at the use of public spaces, that we continue to see housing as a human right, but are cognizant of the challenges in public spaces that can disrupt the use of those public spaces by others or public rights of way. I think lots of communities throughout the country have moved towards sanctioned tent cities. What they don't tend to do a very good job of is looking at all the mistakes that everybody's already made so they don't make them again. Like, I'm just going to ask you a question. If you were going to put together a tent city, don't you think it should meet the minimum requirements of a UN refugee camp? Or when people with lived experience say, don't put tents and grids, put them in a horseshoe so we can see each other, that maybe we should listen? Or community meetings. How many have been to community meetings where you've been told that you suck? That homelessness sucks, your organization sucks, it all just sucks? There's a formula for how these go. If they give me the microphone in the beginning, I like to tell them what's about to transpire before they get to it. So the first thing you're going to tell me is you reject the premise that supportive housing, affordable housing, or shelter is needed. So that's step one. Step two is you're going to agree that maybe a shelter or supportive housing is needed, but not here. Step three is you may agree that the shelter needs to exist, but we're trying to serve the wrong population. And if that doesn't work, then they're going to reject the person delivering the message and personally attack you. For a long time, I'd bite my tongue at these meetings rather than biting theirs. But I'm realizing that we need to push back against the hatred that exists in community meetings and certainly online when it comes to people experiencing homelessness. In addition to every meeting, there's a person with an opinion and an app on their phone that will give them a bullhorn to air their grievances, sometimes in the most foul, dehumanizing terms. How many hateful things have you had said about homeless people in your community? Awful things said about your organization, or even you yourself. If not in social media, then certainly in text messages or voicemails or emails. Have you been trolled? Have you been attacked? I pulled together some of the greatest hits from the past few years that I've received. Ending homelessness has become a violent contact sport. There are people filled with hatred. And the hatred on display in the digital world has resulted in threats to me, my family, and others I love and respect and admire. People I would call friends. Even my elderly mother had to leave Facebook because of hatred displayed for her son and her being bombarded with hateful messages about me and my desire to end homelessness. My mom shouldn't have to quit Facebook. I could tell you it didn't hurt, but I'd be lying. Of course words hurt. And if you hear some of the same hurtful things and often untrue things out of context, things that you can't undo, that there is no mechanism for fighting back, it can drag you down. I live with rather terrible depression. And when you're stuck behind a computer screen for a couple of years during a pandemic, it's not good for your depression. And when you're bombarded with messages like this during a time when your depression is horrible and you're stuck behind a computer screen, well, more than once I wanted to quit permanently. Quit this earth. I want us to get to a place of justice and not criminalization of people without a home. As the expression goes, we need homes, not handcuffs. We need innovation, not incarceration. We need justice, not justification for penalizing people for their existence. We need empowerment, not enforcement. We will sink deeper into the abyss of criminalization of homelessness if we don't have good assertive outreach, if we don't have low barrier day centers, if we don't have all shelters operating in a person-centered, trauma-informed, and housing-focused way. If we create barriers for people to access our services, we're opening up people to further criminal measures. We need to do this all while embracing and acknowledging that Black lives matter, Indigenous lives matter, the lives of other people of color matter. The homelessness response system witnesses historical exclusion and the impacts of failed policy that disproportionately impacts the BIPOC community on a daily basis. And as a white, educated man, I'm learning and unlearning. It seems so much that I was taught needs a sober second look. Things I was told were truths were not. Spins on historical events cover the butt of the oppressor. And I'm also trying to get up to speed on the history of racism in America, because if you didn't know, I'm Canadian, and they don't teach American history in Canadian schools. I was reading an interesting article in Human Resources from 2022. It said prior to the pandemic, about a third of all people in human services, not just homeless services, but human services, thought about quitting on a monthly basis. They found in their survey, in the post-pandemic reality, that is more than 70% of people in human services think of quitting on a monthly basis. Let that sink in. 2/3 of the workforce around you is thinking about quitting every single month. Is it any wonder that we experience so many staffing shortages? And for your community, the high cost of living in the San Diego area and the perpetually egregiously low wages paid in the sector, layered on top of the politics and the needs of people served, it's no wonder that so many people think about quitting. I think it's about time we gave everybody who does this work the professional pay they deserve and a living wage to serve others. Or we'll experience more burnout. Maybe you knew the work wasn't always going to be easy, but I doubt you thought it was going to be this hard. Maybe you're finding it harder to turn off work at the end of the day. Maybe the ratio of heartache to triumph is making you feel like ours is an industry of endless pain and suffering, and there's no way to spin human suffering. Maybe you believe in self-care but abandoned it a long time ago and haven't found the way back. Maybe you too feel weak sometimes. Mentally, emotionally, physically. If I had bulging muscles of mental, emotional, and physical strength, I'd lift the sector up on my shoulders to give them a break. But only now am I coming to appreciate the value of lifting each other up. If your colleague does something amazing and you don't take time to acknowledge what they've done, what a horrible lost opportunity. That the attitude of gratitude in the face of what I can only describe as the right ingredients for a shit sandwich can make us want to absolutely get out. So that's the doom and gloom. I'd like to do a brief group therapy exercise. That's because I suspect I'm not alone. So it kind of makes you want to say at least one word, all the doom and gloom. And I want you to think of saying that word from the belly of your soul, as loud as you need to. Just one word that's going to cleanse you of all the stupidity and awfulness that surrounds us. My word starts with the letter F and ends in a C and a K. And so we're going to do this together. 1, 2, 3. Fire truck. Fire truck was my word, but you picked a different one. Find a good fire truck is really cleansing for the soul. But some of you have potty mouths, as expected. And some of you are really looking forward to saying it out loud. There's some stuff we just need to let go of, right? There's things we can't control. What I can control amidst all of this craziness is my desire to be hopeful. While I am cautious of people inhabited by hate, I have come to appreciate that hate is the problem of the hater. It's not my problem.
That's right.
And that I can just flush away all sorts of the hatred. My finest minute in my darkest hour, in the depths of despair during that time of the pandemic, was realizing that if I let go of hatred, I let go of a huge load, that I focus on that which is good and righteous, and working with communities that share a passion for preventing, reducing, and ending homelessness. Like work where people want you, not where you're bashing your head against a wall.
Right.
And there's a story here that I'd like to share with you, a freaky event that happened in October, and like all good stories that take place in America, if something freaky is going to happen, it happens in Florida. Am I right?